Welcome, everyone. Season 4 of Runners Roundtable, where I'm talking to different women from our running community that inspire us to show up as we are, or to maybe make a little bit of noise within the running community to change how things are. And today I'm excited because I am joined by Stephanie Dunlap. And I will admit, I recently started following you because wrong one, the Instagram algorithm actually worked. And you are on my Discover page. And I was like, wait, who is this person? And as I'm thinking of this season and as I was putting this season together, as I'm trying to find different women to speak to, all your posts just spoke to me in terms of where I've been as a runner, which is trying to connect to the joy of running in a way that is not connected to progression in paces. And that's kind of, I went down the rabbit hole of your reels, and I'm like, she looks like she's having so much fun running, pacing, cheering other people on. And it's people like you that I feel like you should be the face of what running is, right? Of this is a sport that we come to challenge ourselves for ourselves. But because it's a hobby for a lot of us, we should be finding the fun in it. So can you, before we continue on, can you give us an introduction to who you are and how you got started with running?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for those kind words. Yes, Stephanie Dunlap, also known as Steph or Run Strong Run on all of the socials. And that in itself, where that handle came from, has a story in it. But what I like to call myself, or my tagline, is I'm a mom of two little girls and two bonus now adults. One is 18 and one is 21, but also a marathon pacer. And by day, my profession is actually an elementary school vice principal. But I love marathons and I love pacing. And yes, I love cheering on other people. I like to tell people that I'm your number one cheerleader. I was a cheerleader in high school. And so people say once a cheerleader, always a cheerleader. But truly, this sport of running, it is for everyone. And those people who say, well, but I run a 16-minute mile, you are a runner. If you run, you are a runner. And the more that I've started saying that, in fact, I have a reel recently that has kind of gone viral, I guess you could say. It's almost at 2 million views, and it's very 5-second short reel that says, friendly reminder, a 3-hour marathon is the same distance as a 6-hour marathon. And I am shocked by the number of negative comments on this reel. But if anything, it lights a fire under me to continue to spread this message. And I absolutely understand. I'll never know what it's like probably to run a 3-hour marathon. My marathon PR is 4:28, far cry from 3 hours. I also don't know if I'll ever qualify for Boston. But in this moment in time and in this moment of life, that's not what's important to me. What's important to me is the joy of movement. And again, encouraging people that running is for you. I know how life-changing it can be. I used to always say this body doesn't run. I actually sort of stood on the sidelines of a marathon in 2011, cheering on some friends, and I never had seen anything like this before in my entire life. Again, I was someone who said, this body, I don't run. So don't ask me to run because I'm not running. If you see me running, it's because something's chasing me. But staying on the sidelines of this marathon at about mile 20 or so, I was so in awe of what I saw. All of these people of different ages, different ethnicities, different body sizes running past me. I began to say, why not me? If they can do it, why can't I do it? And so I actually went for a training run the next day. I was like, I'm going to do this. And I made it one block. And I was like, this is hard. And, but you know what? Just slowly, day by day, I made it one block further and one block further. And I'll never forget that friend who was running that marathon, who I was cheering on. She invited me to go join her for a 3-mile run. And I was freaking out. I was like, can I keep up with her? Can I do it? I don't know. And doing that run with my friend, just that feeling of accomplishment, like I did that, like I can do hard things. So that marathon I went and stood on the sidelines of in 2011, I actually ran that following year in 2012. That was my first marathon. So I like to say that I went from 0 to 26.2 miles in less than a year. And that was in Mexico. That was in Torreon, Coahuila. I was there teaching 3rd grade at an international school. It was a La marathon. And I also loved to arm wrestle. Arm wrestling started when I was in 5th grade, when I was 11 years old. But in Mexico, I arm wrestled a lot, everywhere, anytime, anybody. And so people with running, adding on to the arm wrestling, people said, corre fuerte, corre, run strong, run.
Oh, I love that.
And so that's kind of where Run Strong Run came from, but it means so much more than that. It's about finding strength in your journey, finding strength in your path where life is taking you or has taken you from, realizing that and celebrating that. Because when I crossed that finish line of my first marathon in 2012, of course, my arms were raised victoriously in the air. And I kind of slumped over after I crossed the finish line because I was crying, and medics came over to me and was like, "Are you okay?" In Spanish. And I was like, yes, I'm fine. Because I just like overcome with that sense of accomplishment and joy. And I had left a abusive marriage in 2008. And so in 2012, 4 years later, coming through this journey of health and kind of self-discovery and healing, like that's where Run Strong Run comes from, is the celebration of that you can do hard things, find strength in your own path and in your own journey. But oh my goodness, I could go on and on and on and talk about it. But that's kind of where it came from. And that marathon, I hope to go back and run again someday because it has so many positive memories for me. But after that marathon, I was like, man, okay, when's my next one? And so my next one was actually the Nike Women's Marathon in San Francisco that I actually ran as part of Team in Training. So I raised money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And a part of that fundraising is I actually held an arm wrestling tournament called Arm Wrestling for a Cure. But yeah, so arm wrestling and strength and running, it all kind of goes hand in hand.
Oh, that's such a fun story. That is such a fun story. And it's also, it echoes a conversation I had yesterday. That by the time this episode comes out, it'll be the episode that came out the previous week with Verna Volker, and she was talking about how running is so healing and how running is medicine. So to hear you say that, for me, I'm like, okay, universe, I hear you. I hear what the message that you're trying to impart. But I think it's also a message that deserves to be amplified, in that running isn't just the physical act of running. It is a transformation of our entire being, of our entire understanding of what we thought was possible. That's what running does. And I also just want to highlight the fact that you came to running later in life. It's not like you grew up running. And I always like to point that out, because when people see that you've been running for any amount of time, the assumption is that you've always been a runner. And it's like, no, actually, I wasn't. I was probably not the whole "this body doesn't run" mentality, but I definitely had the mentality of, I don't like to drive that distance. Why would I want to run it? That's what I would tell myself. And then similarly, I ran my first marathon, and when I finished, I just couldn't believe I did it. I couldn't believe. And obviously you do the training, right? Like, we do the training. We know that the training is supposed to prepare us to run the race, but there's still something so special about crossing the finish line that training doesn't capture. Training doesn't capture race day, what happens and what you're telling yourself, or how you go from, at least for me, and I don't know if it's for you, but how you go from, I don't want to say being a doubter, but being a believer over the distance, where you start the race and you're like, okay, I'm here. I guess we're doing this. And then at some point in the race, and for a marathon, for me, it's always probably mile 22. Once I get to mile 22, it's like, oh, this is getting done. No matter what. At this point, it's getting done. Miles 10 through 16 are kind of like a toss up of maybe it's going to happen. I don't know. But once I hit mile 22, there is a resolve that sets in for me that I know it's going to happen. So I just appreciate that that was kind of your experience, that you went to the race, you observed it, and talk about the best argument for why anyone should run. It's you go and you watch the race and you see that anyone can run, right? Like that is so convincing. How did you get into pacing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, so it was 2016. I had run, I think, like 29 races or something that year. And as we all know, running races, the race registration and everything adds up very quickly. And 2016 was also when I found the Instagram running community, which I absolutely love. I mean, Instagram is probably one of my top favorite social media platforms. And by and large, I mean, I know I talked about the negativity of that one reel, the comments, but by and large, the Instagram running community is very positive. That's my experience, and especially meeting people in real life. I have also found that they've been very positive and welcoming, and just the running community as a whole. That's my take. I choose to focus on the joy and the positive. But 2016, I remember I saw someone post something about pacing, and I was like, pacing, what's that? And I, hopped on Google, did some research, and I was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Okay, I like to talk to people. I like to encourage people. I like to run races for free, because that's the benefit of pacing, is you get to run the race for free race registration. And I was like, I want in on this. And so again, I did some research. And so my first group organization that I paced with is called Beast Pacing. Anyone can join Beast Pacing. You just go to beastpacing.com. The person who's in charge of Beast Pacing is Vanessa, a great woman. She's also a race director. But so we have Beast Pacers all over the country. We pace half marathons and full marathons. We also pace the hot chocolate series. So I pace the 15K hot chocolate every year. I pace the 15-minute mile. And so I love having fun there in San Francisco at the hot chocolate run every year in January. But yeah, that's kind of how I got started. So I paced my first half marathon in April of 2016. And I've gone back to that half marathon. It's a local one here in Northern California called the Run Rockland Half Marathon. I've gone back to it now several different times, paced different times. I think that first time pacing, I don't know if I paced a 2:10 half marathon or maybe 2:30. I don't remember exactly, but like the slowest I paced at that race is like 3:30. So I've paced like a wide range of different paces in that half marathon. That's kind of how I got started. Was I was like, okay, I want to run races without paying the race registration fee.
That's so smart. It hadn't even occurred to me that that was something you could do. That makes a lot of sense, because then I mean, race registrations are a big expense. So if you can save on that, then you can kind of splurge on traveling to different races. How do you go about preparing for pacing?
Yeah, that is a great question. So as much as I say anyone can be a pacer, there is a certain skill set to pacing. I mean, because ideally as a pacer, you're not banking a lot of time. So let's take a 6-hour marathon, because that's one of my favorite distances to pace. So ideally at the halfway point, you're going to be at 3 hours, because half of 6 hours is 3 hours. So at 13.1 miles, you're going to want to be as close to 3 hours within a minute, never over, as possible. One of my favorite races to pace is the California International Marathon, in always the first Sunday of December. And we actually, as pacers on that pace team, we have a competition of which pace team can have the most even splits. And if you think about it, that's quite a challenge. Over the course of 26.2 miles, you want your pace to be the same at every mile. So the trick about being a pacer is we can't rely on our watch. Like your watch will beep and say, okay, mile 1, here's your pace time. We actually have to go on the mile markers of the course. So often runners' watches will be saying, oh, we're at 1 mile, but we see 1 mile up ahead, because often our watch is not the same as like what the course is marked. And that's just because as runners aren't following that tangent that they have measured the course with. And so that's the challenge. We wear a pace band. It says at each mile what elapsed time we want to be at. So I'm constantly like running numbers in my head, because as you get later on in the race, you're like, okay, mile 20, we want to be at 4:35:26, and we're at 4:35:20. Okay, we're 6 seconds ahead of pace. Great job. Let's keep this pace up. Because you want to be as close to that finish time of 6 hours as possible. Never over. That's a big no-no as a pacer. Within 1 minute. So that is quite a challenge, but I love a good challenge and I love crunching numbers. So that's the joy of being a pacer.
Yeah, that's so fascinating, because I've had, depending on the size of the races, it can be a little challenging to find pace groups. But I still remember, I believe it was 2014 that I ran a half marathon in Chicago. And it was the first time that I ran with a pace group. And it was a smaller race, which I think that made it a lot easier to kind of find the pace group and then stay with the pace group. And those pacers were awesome. I mean, they talked the entire time. They were encouraging. It was the 2:05 pace group. And once we hit mile 13, he was like, go, leave me, go get a sub 2:05. Like, you can do it. You can do better than that. And I remember thinking, no, I can't. And he was like, go, like, go. And I did it. And I was like, it was like 2:04:49 or something like that. It was something that I was like, I can't believe I did that. I did a 2:05. That's amazing. And at the end, the people who stuck with the pacers the entire time, the pacer came up and he's like, great job. You did it. It was awesome. And so I had that experience, great. And I've heard of people who've had similar experience, but then I've also heard of people who have had experience with pacers who don't talk and who just like a metronome, or I don't even know what the word is, maybe more robotic, where they have their little sign and then they're just moving, not engaging with anyone around them. So I'm curious, is that just how that person paces, or maybe how that company provides pacers? I guess, is there, in your experience, is everyone pacing the way you pace, or no?
Well, I'm definitely the party pacer. So I love to talk, and I love it when runners around me want to talk. Of course, I've experienced it too, where runners around me don't want to talk. So that's okay. But the miles pass a lot faster for me when people want to talk. Because actually, as pacers, we're told you can't listen to music. So we're out there without headphones or any kind of music or anything. And we are supposed to, at each mile or each mile marker, announce our total lapse time and like where we're at in relation to our assigned pace. But as far as like Vanessa with Beast Pacing, she definitely tells you like you should be encouraging runners around you. You should be, if they have any questions, like help to answer their questions, because often runners, that's the great thing about running with experienced pacers. They might know that course really well. So you can ask them, okay, we're here at mile 20. What do I have for this next 10K? Let me know, like, how much should I have reserved, or like, is there a hill coming up, or, things like that. And so I would say that is few and far between, those more robotic pacers. But I can also imagine, like, at the much faster paces, it might be more challenging to have a conversational pace. Whereas my group at 13:44 per mile, it might be a little more easy to have that conversational pace.
So, but even with something like that, I've always wondered, how do you determine what pace group you're going to do? Because I'm assuming it's I'm going to assume this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to assume that you're going to pace a group at something that is a quote unquote easier effort for you, right?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. So let's go back again to beast pacing, because they're the ones I've paced with the longest. They say for half marathon, you're going to take your last 3 half marathons you've paced. You're going to take that average finish time, and then you can pace anything that's 15 minutes slower.
Hmm.
Or is it 15 minutes slower? I believe so. Yeah, 15 minutes for a half marathon, slower than the average of your last 3 finish times. And then it's 20 minutes slower than the average of your last 3 full marathons. So yes, if you're running with a pacer, they should easily be able to run that pace they're assigned. Again, it's mind-boggling to me, these 3-hour full marathon pacers. I just can't imagine that these 3-hour full marathon pacers can run, sub 3-hour marathon. And then they're pacing 3 hours and it's easy. But I also want to remind people who are listening, or the runners who have ran with pacers, and that things happen. Like, we're human. We're certainly not robots. I have run marathons. I can vividly remember 2. The Lake Tahoe Marathon, it was at elevation, and you actually like climb 1,000 feet near Emerald Bay. I was assigned 5:30 and I came in at 5:40 because I was very nauseous from mile 18 on. And I remember I crossed that finish line and I was like crying, because I was like, I let beast pacing down. I let myself down. I let runners around me down. But things happen. And so just remember that too, that we are still human. We're not robots, and we're out there traversing those 13.1 miles or 26.2 miles with you too.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned that, what does your training look like? Is there Steph's training for herself as a runner, and then there's your training as a pacer? What does training look like for you when it comes to, I guess, your own personal running, and then when you're pacing?
Well, I'd say 2023 has been unique in that I've only raced a handful of races, very few. I've mainly paced. So, but I don't really actually train at my assigned pace time. I just train kind of what just feels good. And so it's usually, I don't know if you want to say much faster, but I guess it's faster than the pacing that I go out and run at pace time. Now that I've been doing a while, I mean, when this episode airs, I'll have ran 11 full marathons in 2023, culminating with the California International Marathon. And out of those 11 full marathons, I'll have paced 9 of them, I believe. Yeah. So, and some of them, I was also the sweeper. So another video or reel that went viral was on TikTok, actually, of me sweeping the Carlsbad Marathon, which that's a whole nother beast in itself if you talk about sweeping a marathon. Because that one I finished in, I think, like 6 hours and 45 minutes. But you go into sweeping a marathon and you have no idea how long you're going to be out there for, because how On Pace Race, which another great organization I love pacing for, I joined them in 2022 or sorry, 2022. Last year, On Pace Race. They are run by Paul and Carrie Miller out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. But On Pace Race, I love that they believe that no runner should be left behind. So if you see them at a half marathon, or if you see them at a full marathon, they will assign the sweeper. They also call them as last chance pacers to stick with the last runner, regardless of what time they come in. So I've now served as sweeper 2 times, and it's kind of weird you start the race and you're like, I have no idea how long I'm gonna be out here for. 7 hours, 8 hours, like how long are you out here for? So speaking of training, I mean, that's just like a lot of time on your feet. That's kind of getting more into the ultra marathon world. I mean, although that's very different, I don't know a whole lot about ultra marathons, and often that's on trails and things like that. But if you think about it, that's almost a full day job. If you think about it, you're out there 6, 7, 8 hours. And if you're working 6, 7, 8 hours at your job, you're going to expect a break or 2. You're going to expect a lunch. You're going to expect to want to sit down. And so if you think about, these people are out on their feet, moving forward for 6, 7, 8 hours. It's quite amazing.
And that doesn't even take into consideration how, what time they woke up, how much time they spent before the race, right? Because I think of a great example here, and just to drop like a big name, right, is the New York City Marathon, where you'll have people who are maybe in that athlete village anywhere between 1 to 3 hours before their start time. So can you imagine let's give it an average, 2 hours before your race, and then you go and you do an 8 hour marathon. That's 10 hours that you've been up and, gearing for this event. And that's something that's really impressive. So that brings me back to, if you don't mind, that reel that you shared where the 3 hour, it's same distance as a 6 hour. What was some of the comments that you were getting on that? Because I find that, to your point, the longer you're out there, the more you have to plan for when it comes to fueling, when it comes to how you're actually pacing yourself. There's a whole different host of considerations. So what were some of the comments? Because I saw that reel and I'm like, she's so true. This is right. And I don't know. I'm confused.
Yeah. I don't know if some of the negative comments came from people who have never done a marathon. I think that
Okay.
that's part of it too, or some of these young bucks, shall we call them, who are, either in high school or fresh out of high school and running 15-minute 5Ks or, things like that. And they see a 6-hour marathon averaging 13:44 per mile. And they're like, that's a walk. I could walk the whole thing. Those were a lot of comments is you're walking, don't call yourself a runner. And again, I'll say it again, what I said before, if you run, you are a runner. So yes, at 13:44, how I pace the 6-hour marathon is I run 90 seconds, walk 90 seconds. Our run pace is about 12:40 per mile and our walk pace is 15 minutes per mile. And a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, oh my goodness, that's a fast walk. But I like to call it walking with purpose. We're here, we're doing a marathon, so we're going to walk with purpose. But yeah, so we run 90 seconds, walk 90 seconds. And so a lot of comments will say, you can't call yourself a runner, you're walking a marathon. There should be a cutoff time. That should be a DNF, things like that. Yeah.
Which is so, so frustrating, because I guess the question I have, and I don't think there's an answer, but it's, how did we get to this point that running was only running without stopping? I just don't, that to me, I find that people, the longer I'm in the sport and the more I have conversations on this podcast and with people outside of the podcast, it's so hard for a lot of people to even take ownership of calling themselves runners without adding the disclaimer of, oh, but I run walk, or I take walk breaks, or any number of excuses. And when people tell me that, I'm like, it doesn't matter. You're still finishing, you're still covering the distance. And I guarantee you that you're covering the distance faster than if you actually walked. Like, I'm a fast walker. All right. I will give myself as an example here. I am a fast walker. I irritate my family with how fast I walk everywhere. And even then, what's the fastest I can walk a mile in? 16 minutes. Like, that's the fastest. And that's me, like, moving my arms, and I've got a power walk going on. So it's astounding to me that someone would say that I could walk a mile in 13:45. Like, really, have you tried it? Not to kind of push people here, but it's so interesting that people will use how you're covering the distance as almost like a gatekeeper or a gatekeeping thing to the sport. How do you, I guess, you let that kind of comment get to you or bother you?
Again, I'm human. So are there moments or times I read these comments and it's like, ouch, yikes. Um, but I would say by and large, reading these comments, oh man, it fires me up. So these people better be ready because I'm gonna start sharing this message more and more and more.
You're like, how can I do this video now? How can I do this now? Where can I show them at the race? Like, and you have such great images of you holding the 6 hour signage. And to me, I guess where I take issues with comments like that is like, who cares? Like, if it's not you, let people be. Like,
Mhm.
what's wrong with that? There was years ago, it was on Kelly K. Roberts, one of her podcasts, and I believe it had to do with like the Berlin Marathon. Whenever she ran the Berlin Marathon, that she had the opportunity to speak to the elite runners. And she had asked them, if I'm butchering the story, y'all, you can tell me I'm butchering it, but I think it's anecdotally, it's what we're talking about here. And she had asked them, how do you run a marathon in 2.5 hours, 3 hours? And that one of the elite athletes responded to her with, I don't know how you do it in 4. And I'm like, exactly. So why is it that an elite athlete can see that I don't know how you're doing a 4 or 5 hour marathon in the same way that we're looking at an elite athlete and saying, I don't know how you do that in 2.5 hours. So where is it that all the people in the middle, not all, but some of the people in the middle get really caught up with, oh, you're not running a marathon because you're taking walk breaks. What is it? Like, I just don't understand. What does that have to do with other people's lives, right? Like,
Absolutely. And also some of the comments too were talking about how, oh, how can you compare those two? The training looks completely different. Also comments were like, if you were just to challenge yourself or push yourself, you could go faster. And I think those are just ignorant people who can only see the world from their perspective and cannot see the world from other people's perspective. Because I can tell you that being a 6 hour pacer, hearing these people's stories and where they've come from and what brought them to running and what brought them to that starting line. And 6 hours is some of those people's best, and they should be gosh darn proud of it. If 7 hours is your best of a marathon, you should be gosh darn proud of it. And you better call yourself a marathoner and a runner because you've earned that by traversing this 26.2 miles. But I just remember sweeping the Carlsbad Marathon. I was behind a runner, and I'll be honest and say, because this is, I'm not proud of this. We were going pretty slow and we were early on in the race, like probably even within the first half. And all I could think was, oh my goodness, is this what the next 13, 14 miles is going to bring going this speed with this runner? And I was starting to get kind of negative in my head. But then when he finally opened up and talked to me and was telling me that he had brain cancer and he told himself that he was going to be out there doing it, like, oh my God, I'm getting emotional just like remembering this. Like I felt like, oh my goodness, I am such a horrible person for thinking this, like he's going so slow, because wow, amazing that he is out here fighting the battle of his life, traversing these 26.2 miles. And what a joy and honor for me to be out on course with him, showing him support, saying you're not alone. Like I'm going to be here with you no matter the pace you go. So.
Okay. So let's have a moment, because that's what we miss when we make judgments.
Mm-hmm.
We miss the story. And I have my own personal experience, and people are probably on the podcast. You can go ahead and listen to it. The Marine Corps Marathon Recap. I have an episode on that. And that was to what you're sharing of, you don't know a person's story and you don't know what's happening and you don't know what's going through their minds on race day. I had the Marine Corps Marathon and I had trained, and my goal, my what I call my challenging but manageable goal was 4:30. That's what I thought. I'm like, you know what? considering the stress of my life, I think that's what would be challenging, but I could do it. And race day came, and I was overcome with grief during the run, and I could not get it together. I wanted to sob. I was feeling completely heartbroken on this run. Like all the stuff at this point, I know all the stuff that I had been avoiding feeling for the past 5-6 months of my life. In the marathon, that's when it came up. So all of a sudden, this 4:30 goal, it ended in me finishing in 5 hours and 4 minutes. And let me tell you, that run, and I had posted on my own Instagram account, I'm like, I've ran a race that started with a 3. I've ran several that start with 4. And now I have one that starts with a 5. And they're all the same, right? Like it's not, and I say that they're all the same in terms of when I finish, it didn't matter what number was in front, because I was just so grateful that I was able to finish, because each race has its own story, and each of us, we're all our own walking stories, and we don't know, like you really, it's that, it's that saying of like, be kind to everyone because you don't know what they're going through. It's precisely that saying. And I'm here to share, my own personal experience of, I went into the race with a plan and a hope. And what came up for me emotionally that day, that's not what was in the cards for me. And it doesn't make me any less. It doesn't make anyone any less. And I finished that race. And even now to this day, it's been a month, but even now at this point, I'm like, I guess that particular race really changed me. So sounding like how this race changed you of, yeah, the time has a place, but if we don't even ever get to make it to the start line, and if we don't ever get to make the journey to the finish line, none of that stuff matters. How fast you go, how slow you go, whether you take walk breaks, none of it matters. And everyone should be celebrated for doing that. And I want to go back and just thank you for sharing that, because it shows that even you, as someone who is a pacer, right, who has had the experience of listening to different people's story, those thoughts still can creep up. So it's not like, oh, I'm a pacer and now I'm okay with everybody's pace and everyone, we can do it. Okay. No, there's still that moment of you having to check yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, I guess the question I want to ask is, how do the stories that you hear while you're pacing, how do they change you?
Yeah, I would say they make me a more compassionate person. They make me more compassionate runner. I think just what you were saying, that saying is so true, is you be kind to everyone, for you never know the battle they're facing. I mean, just recently in October of this year, I got to pace the Detroit Free Press Marathon for the second year in a row with On Pace race. And in my pace group, there were several first-time marathoners. Those are some of my favorite people, is getting to cheer those people on as they're traversing their very first 26.2 miles. One of them was a man in his 60s who had heart problems, heart issues, medical things, but certain things replaced or whatnot. But he's out there and he's doing it because he's like, I'm celebrating that I'm still alive and I want to have better health and I want to live a long life. Or you have another guy who was in my pace group. Both the 60-year-old man and this other guy were with me for all 26.2 miles. I mean, like it was like at mile 25 that they finally went ahead because they felt like they had that energy in them, which makes me so fun. So happy to see when runners still have that energy to push ahead towards the end. But another guy who was celebrating his sobriety, and he was actually training for 100-mile race. And so he was out there doing this 26.2 mile race for his training and celebrating his sobriety. So I think just if anything, it makes me a more compassionate person, a more compassionate runner. It makes me see the good in the world. And so that's why, again, too, when I post these reels or I post these TikToks and I have these negative comments come in, it makes me feel sad for these people that one, they find it okay to post such negativity on someone's post. Often people do that. They hide behind a screen or hide behind a computer, and they think that they can say and do whatever they want. So it makes me kind of feel sad for them,
Yeah.
but also it spurs me on to continue to spread the message of joy and encouragement. And I feel like that this is my mission in life in this moment in time to be that voice to the back of the pack runners, to stand in the gap for them, because some races maybe don't see the value of having a 6-hour marathon pacer. And so I have to give a huge shout out to the California International Marathon, because I was their first 6-hour pacer in 2021. And I think that was just a huge accomplishment that they would add a 6-hour pacer, that I get to be that person. So I plan to pace a 6-hour marathon for the California International Marathon for as long as I can, because I just think that we need, again, more of that message of that all runners count, all runners are welcome here. And if you're going to post that your marathon finish time or marathon cutoff is 6 hours, there's a big group of people who want to meet that cutoff time. And so I'm there in the race, they're out on course saying, if you stick with me, I will get you there and you will meet that cutoff time. So, wow. Yeah.
This is a question that I find that I ask guests quite often, because you're choosing to do this, right? You're choosing to be that voice. You're choosing to be that person. And there have been people, obviously, who come before you as runners who have not made that choice. What do you think makes you different?
Oh, Stephanie, bringing the hard-hitting question. Because I've been in this pacing community now for 7 years, I meet people who are similar to myself, people who love sweeping marathons. So sweeping marathons are not my favorite thing. I find it much more challenging than pacing the 6-hour marathon. So please just put me in the 6-hour spot. I don't really want to sweep. So the sweepers hold a very special place in my heart. I think they're amazing people. But what makes me different? Okay, so let's go back to let's go back to my first marathon. I finished in 4:35, and then my fastest marathon is 4:28. So I've not improved my marathon time by that much. But I'm a competitive person. So is there still a piece of me that wants to get faster and likes to push myself and challenge myself? Yes, absolutely. But again, I think as runners, we can sometimes fall into this trap of that's where we measure our success is on our pace, is on our finish time, just kind of like what you're talking about, Stephanie, with your recent marathon. You kind of went into it with the goal of like 4:30 and you finished a little over 5. And I'm sure there was maybe still that little piece of letdown, like, okay, I went in kind of with a goal and I didn't meet my goal. And it can be really hard to be in that place, because I've been in that place too, where you go into a marathon with a goal and stuff happens. I mean, 26.2 miles, that's a lot. Marathon is a whole nother beat, different than 5K, 10K, half marathon. A lot can happen over the course of 26.2 miles. So I guess, why do I choose to, again, pace a 6-hour marathon again and again and again? And I think it's just people's stories. Like, I love people and I love their stories. And going back to the Detroit Free Press Marathon, I had a runner in my pace group, and sadly she was only with us for like the first half, and then she had to stop and use the bathroom, and sadly she wasn't able to catch back up to us. I kept turning around, I kept yelling her name, and I was like, come on, you've got this. But she is so sweet that she mailed me a package thanking me for pacing her in that first half of the marathon. And so I think that, and I've also had someone who's my pace group who has knit me a hat. I think just hearing people's gratitude or seeing people's gratitude or seeing people cross that finish line, that's what keeps me coming back for more. And so again, I think I just, you go through life and you wonder, what am I here for? And so I believe I'm here in this moment in time to stand in the gap for these back of the pack marathoners and to say all runners count, to encourage them. I've had this one runner now, so this episode's going to air after the California International Marathon, but I've had one runner who has messaged me, DM'd me several different times, going back and forth about wanting to run the California National Marathon. And because she's had so many people speak negativity into her life, that she was wondering if she can do it. And so I want people to know that my DMs are always open. Like, if you're needing that little added encouragement, I'm going to send you a voice message with all of the encouragement and positivity, saying that you can do this. Again, once a cheerleader, always a cheerleader. So when I say I'm Steph, I'm a marathon pacer, and I'm your number one cheerleader, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. And you're bringing up something I don't know if people really stop to think about it. And it's probably just me, because I spend a lot of time in my head, but a marathon, and I know we're talking a lot about the marathon, and it's because it's such a big distance, but a marathon really does, I don't want to say it breaks a person down, but it exposes a person. And hearing you share the stories and hearing you talk about your experience, it's like, it takes so much courage and vulnerability to put yourself out there and to say, I'm going to run this marathon. And it's so interesting because I've, my running, again, it's shifted a little bit in terms of pacing or focus on pace. And I just wrote this down because you're in line with where I'm at, where it's like, okay, can we redefine what we mean by a PR? Right?
Mm.
Can we, and if you look at my, I'll show you, oh, everyone's going to see right here, but the lamp's in the way, but I have this thing there. My desk is my office area is kind of coming together, but I have my daughters before the London Marathon. They worked on this wooden project. I wonder if it's easy if I just grab it. And it says every mile has a story. And then it has little clamps for me to put my bibs. And then it says my personal record. And then it has little hooks for the medals. And with them, and in my journey to London, my personal records were feeling. So I have on it right now written joy of, that's the personal record of, can I do this incredibly hard and challenging thing and have the feeling that predominates or dominates the experience be joy?
Mm.
And let me tell you, running in that way has, in its own strange way, helped me fall in love with marathons again. Like, I'm actually excited to do another marathon. And I'm like, even after my Marine Corps, there was maybe like a second where I was like, well, there goes my time goal, because it ended up being an experience of, how can I survive what I'm feeling?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even care about the time. It was very much so like, how can I keep moving forward when my heart feels like it's shattering? At that point, listen, I'm worried about putting the pieces of my heart together so I can take another step forward. I don't even care about time, right? Like, I didn't care about time at that point, but it's such a beautiful, what you're saying just made me think of that reminder of, we run for more than just time. And even, it sounds so obvious and it's so silly, and yet you highlighted it, that yeah, a lot of these races will have cutoff times, but won't necessarily have pace groups that go all the way to that time. And I'm thinking, my mind is going through the Rolodex of races right now. And I'm like, yeah, they usually stop at like the 5 hour mark.
Mhm. Yep.
And it's like, oh, then how are you really making this race for everyone, for everyone? Whether
Mhm.
it's that you have pacers to help people do it, or you have water and your fuel and your volunteers out on the course while all of that's happening. And I'm just, my heart right now is breaking for people who have done these races with the 6 hour cutoff and they haven't had the support of a pace group, because it's a different mental game from, I consider myself a middle of the pack runner. So I'm always surrounded by, there's a ton of people that are faster than me, a ton of people that are slower than me, a ton of people that are right where I'm at. So I'm always surrounded by runners. But being a back of the pack, you're not. So how do you help the people that you're pacing navigate that, like mentally get through any speed bumps that they might experience with that?
Yeah, I think one, I like to turn to mantras. Um, and I encourage people when I'm encouraging those who are running their first marathon, what's going to be your go-to mantra? Do you have it written on your hand? Do you have it written on your arm so you can remember it in those moments? But I think addressing the discomfort, like get comfortable in the discomfort. I say that to the people in my pace group. I'm like, my body's feeling this too. We're at mile
Mhm.
20. We still have a 10K left. Yes. But let's not think about that. Let's think about that. We just went 20 miles. Have you gone 20 miles before in your life? No, this is your first ever time. Awesome. Now with every step already PR, like,
Mhm.
so, but let's go ahead and address that. We're feeling discomfort right now. And so we're going to get comfortable in this discomfort. And I think that's a true too for life. We experience discomfort in life. Let's get comfortable in that discomfort and let's move
Mhm.
forward. And so I think that's one thing I encourage runners who are around me. But I've also been a 6 hour pacer for smaller marathons where I'm all by myself. And that is really hard. I can think of one particular race, the Casper Marathon in Casper, Wyoming. And someone might be like, why would you ever want to go to Casper, Wyoming? But I did it. And I had a woman with me, one, until like mile 15 or 16 or something. And sadly, she did fall behind me. And so I was by myself for a lot of the race. And so talk about like the mental battle for myself, because, it's very different when you're pacing versus kind of like doing your own race, because when you're pacing, again, you need to stick to
The
this consistent
structure.
pace. Yeah. But there were some, often with pacing and pacing the 6 hour marathon, you also will come up on people later on in the race, people who went out too fast, which is a common thing runners do. They start out too fast, they burn out, and then they're going to slow down later on in the race. And so how I encourage those people is I say, hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm the 6 hour pacer. Come on, join me. We're running 90 seconds, walking 90 seconds. Let's go. And so I pick up people along the way, things like that. Just, I try to make it fun, try to get people's mind off of that discomfort. I have a signature pacing sound I like to do, because sometimes we quite quiet. The
Mhm.
spectators might have gone away, people watching the marathon. Or it just sometimes gets quiet, and it's so easy to get into your head. I mean, they say
Yeah,
running a marathon is 80% mental, 20% physical. And in your head, like that can be your worst enemy. So I think
absolutely.
just continuing to make it fun, and that party, I'm like, come on, 6 hour party, let's go. And I recently I had someone post a reel saying how they dislike when people call it a party pace, because one person's party pace is maybe the other person's like that's their fastest. And when I say 6 hour party, what I mean is running a marathon is fun. And I feel
Yeah.
as like if you're not having fun, I don't know, like it just that's not what I want to do in my life when outside of work. I mean, I also enjoy what I do too for work, but like on the weekends, I want to have fun. Like I love marathons. I love the atmosphere. I just love everything about it. maybe when it has more people, maybe not when it's all by myself, because I'm like, okay, this is not very fun, but but when there's a big group, the California National Marathon, I always have a lot of people around me. So if you're in my 6-hour group for the California National Marathon, you're certainly not going to be alone. I mean, there's always people around in that 6-hour group, but yeah, make it fun, get comfortable in discomfort, and remember how far you've come.
Mm. Yeah, it's so funny because I actually love party pace. And when I say party pace, I mean the same thing. Like, yes, part of it is that we're going to slow down, but it's also, there is no, like, we're not attaching a number to what that slow down is. What we're attaching is a feeling. And that
Mhm.
feeling is that we're going out there to enjoy being out there. Like, we're going out there to socialize, to have fun, to like celebrate the fact that our bodies can do this thing called running. It's not easy. So it's so interesting how it's like, if it's not, if party pace or sexy pace or any of those, like, it's so interesting just how language can change our experience of something. So it's running is so interesting. All right, I have 3 more questions for you. And question number 1 is, what words do you have for someone who is looking at that 6-hour marathon and it's a dream, but they're too scared to say that that's their dream because they've received that message that even if you do a 6-hour marathon, you're still not a runner.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah. So I have had people message me with these people have messaged me and yeah, it's so unfortunate that the negative messages are filling their mind, and maybe it's because they don't have enough positive people encouraging them and telling them that you are a runner. And so again, that's what lights the fire in me to spread this message far and wide and more, that you are a runner. But to those people, I'd say, the best comeback to those people who are say you're not a runner and you can't do it is to show up to that starting line and to do it. And make sure you are doing a marathon where there's going to be that 6-hour pacer, and meet that 6-hour pacer and talk to them and cling to them and do the whole race with them. I would encourage you to join me. So I would often tell people, hey, here's my race schedule. Find a marathon that I'm going to be at in the 6-hour group and come and let's do it. Because again, the best comeback is to show those people that you're going to do it. Because I guarantee that if you start with me, you're going to finish.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that because I find that oftentimes people don't have the support in their lives. And I
Mhm.
just want to just kind of piggyback off of if that's the goal, then, there are people like you that they can follow on social media that maybe the people in real life aren't supportive, but there is a community somewhere for
Mhm.
you that can offer you that support. And
Mhm.
I give my example here where it's like, no one in my family runs, no one does marathons. No one, like, my husband will run for maybe 20 minutes and he's like, yeah, I'm done. Like, that's good. And where I find my community of belonging is the women that I meet up with on Saturdays to do my run, or my friends over social media that, we're talking on Instagram, but then we're texting as well. But then we have multiple group chats. Like, these are people that are not here, and yet they're my community. These are the people who make me feel like I can go after big goals. So I just want to kind of throw that out there too, of not only find you at the race, but start following, start following and start seeing that message of running is for everyone. Running is, if you want to do a 6-hour marathon, there are people like me that want to be there to support you, to get you to do it. ask me for my training schedule, I'll tell you. Like, even that's something really cool of, okay, I can pick a marathon that you're going to be pacing and then have that be my goal. So maybe people in my life don't understand it, but let me start to put a little work into finding the people that do understand, because they do exist. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Question number 2 is just remind us where we can find you online, and maybe what is the best way to get your pacing schedule?
Yes. So on the socials, Run Strong Run is what I'm known as, is my handle on Instagram or TikTok. I do have a Facebook page too, but it's probably my least favorite. Instagram is probably my favorite.
Yeah.
TikTok I'm trying to get more into, but I feel like I'm just getting too old. No. um but yeah, and the best way to get my race schedule is I actually have an Instagram story highlight that says races. So currently it says 2023 has my 2023 race schedule, but many of the races that I have paced in 2023 I plan to do again in 2024. Although I did say I was slowing down, it's difficult when I just find so much joy and fulfillment. And I have to give a huge shout out to my family. My mom's actually downstairs right now with my 2 little girls, keeping them entertained while I'm here talking with you. So I mean, truly, it takes a village, and I have a great support system. My husband, I don't think he fully understands this whole running thing. He doesn't run. He's only run with me once ever. It was for my 28th birthday, and that was a one and done thing for him, because he asked me, "What do you want for your birthday?" And I said, "I want you to run with me." And we've gone on one run together, and he almost died. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, my husband doesn't get it. I've gotten my oldest daughter, she did a 5K, and even then she was like, this is awful, I never want to do it again. So no one gets it in my immediate household. So shout out to the family members who support us in going after something that we love but that they don't get at all. So all right, final question is, what final words do you have for us?
final words. Just remember, it doesn't matter your pace. It doesn't matter the distance you run. If you run, you are a runner.
And we're going to leave it at that, y'all. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining me in this episode, everyone. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.